Hi, thank you for joining us. My name is Belle, and I am joined today by Tom Connolly, CEO of International Light of Technologies, and Donald Moet, award-winning makeup artist and head of department on film. Today, we are here to discuss the UVC technology and how it's become an added tool for disinfecting. So, Tom, Great. First question goes to you.
Yes, ma'am.
So can we get like the basics of what is the UVC germicidal light?
So there are lots of different UVC germicidal lights. There are lots of devices that emit the kind of light that we need to do disinfection. Low pressure mercury lamps, excimer lamps, xenon lamps, flashlights, pulsed xenon lights, not flashlights. So and LEDs and all of those devices have some implications, different values, different purposes, different benefits for disinfection. It all depends on exactly what you want to do and how you want to do it.
So now we hear a lot about the UVC technology, and you hear about it in the news about a way of disinfecting. And we've had a lot of questions in regards to the technology. Does it really work? Is it effective?
Absolutely effective. It's been used for many, many, many years.
Yes.
The trick is, and this is my biggest fear, is that people are not taking what's known as the dose seriously. They don't really know how much they're supposed to be using or how much they're supposed to be applying in order to achieve a true disinfection. And if you don't know how much you're applying, you don't know whether you're doing anything or nothing at all. And that's the scary part, because you give people a false sense of security if you're not providing the correct dose.
Right. So you have to do your research in how effective the tool is before even applying it for disinfecting.
Absolutely. And again, you mentioned UVC to start with, but there's also some UVA and UVB that are effective for doing bacteria, molds, and fungus, but they're not necessarily particularly good at the viruses and the more harmful germs that we're all worried about now in this current time. So, you know, you've got to think about the whole spectrum of the UV and what you're trying to achieve and how much time you have, because dose is very time-related value.
So, you know, it's interesting because, you know, we always, I mean, certainly working in film for over 30 years, I mean, light, everything has changed. Things like now that we're into this pandemic, it's shaken us probably more than most other businesses. So we have no movies, nobody's going to the theater. It's come to a standstill, and we've slowly gone back to work. And there are a couple things out there that are really, they're hot topics, like within our unions in New York, Los Angeles, Toronto. Everybody's got a different take on something. And unfortunately, I don't know if we're always going to the right, I mean, I'll get in trouble for saying it, but I sometimes wonder, like, who are we going to for this information? Because it's like anything, there's pro, con. I mean, it's like Proposition 22, you know, the Uber thing. So as a makeup artist, I mean, okay, a couple things. Is there a difference between saying UV and UVC? Because I hear both terms. So could you please clarify for a layman like myself what that difference is?
Great question. So within the ultraviolet spectrum, which typically goes from 200 nanometers all the way up to 400 nanometers, there are three bandwidths, if you will, that define the sections of UV. There's UVA, UVB, and UVC. UVC is the furthest, and they actually have a further description now. They're talking about far UVC, which is the 200 to 220 region. So each one of those bandwidths has different implications for people and for disinfection and for use. For example, there are certain bandwidths in the UVA-B bandwidth that are used for curing UV adhesives. Those aren't necessarily used for disinfection or germicidal applications. So there's UV uses outside of just disinfection. But your question is, there's a bandwidth for UVC, there's one for UVB, and there's one for UVA. and they don't overlap. Those are continuous spectrum differences.
So each stand alone unto themselves, right?
So UV is a broad definition of, say, 200 to 400 nanometers, and then within that bandwidth, there are sections, UVA, UVB, and UVC.
Okay.
Just a quick one that'll help you a little bit more. UVC, so the sun generates all of those wavelengths, but because of our atmosphere, UVC never gets to us. UVC is not in sunlight. UVA and B are in sunlight. And those are the ones that give us a tan, they burn our skin. Those are all the things. UVC does not reach the earth, the ground in the earth, because of our atmosphere.
Okay. And I guess my other question, so I mean, I'm particularly keen on the light boxes because when I went back to work on a project in Europe, we have these COVID officers now who come in all forms, right? And now there's people ex-military, ex-policemen. There's people who take a course for 4 hours, and I could be wrong about this, who are suddenly a COVID specialist, which really leaves me, because we know this is about insurance and liability, and I will get in so much trouble. But we've talked about it so much, but there's a lot of people who are calling themselves COVID officers, and they monitor the sets now that people are standing 6 feet apart. You know, testing, they have different companies that test us every 2 days. So for instance, like I really like the SterileLight box because it dries the makeup brushes. So because we're not allowed to have anything out on our counters anymore, which is really difficult because anything in a craft or an art, I mean, it's a mess. By the time you process 10 actors, it looks like a bomb hit the trailer. Now we have extra people coming in there. People supervise our cleaning. I put everything once I wash them, which I've always done, into the box, into the SterileLight box to dry. The brushes come out perfect. I put them back in their respective closed containers. Do you feel like that's our protocol that most of us are following, but a couple of people are trying to dismiss it like it's there are other technologies? You know, there's always someone who's trying to dispel or trying to get people to not use something for something else.
There's always going to be battles about who's is better at doing what, right? And we see this all the time with people who are using different light sources. We see the people who are using low pressure mercury. We see the people who are using pulsed xenon. We see the people who are using LEDs. It really comes down to what light are you using? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with the SterileLight product. They have 2 primary wavelengths inside their box. One is 405, which is really good in the bacterial, fungicide, you know, the molds, those kinds of things. And they do have a UVC component at 282. It probably depends on exactly what you're trying to kill and how much time you're going to give it. That's where the dose comes in. Did I lose everybody?
No, I think
I'm here.
Jill's here.
I think Jill is trying to become part of it anyway.
I am here. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
We can
hear you.
Hi, Jill.
We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay. I'm not sure if I can make that any different on seeing me. Let me.
If you turn on your camera.
Well, Tom, that's actually really helpful for us.
There you go. Hi, Jill.
It's really helpful for us because we've had so many at every level and the different studios. So the jobs I'm responsible for designing, makeup and prosthetics, we've altered things. For instance, you know, I've got one film that was meant to be released. We had a 5-hour, very extensive prosthetic makeup. It was a 5-hour makeup, huge prosthetic with, I mean, a big fat suit, the whole works. The studio asked us, could we reduce our time because it's 5 people to make up this one actor. So we but you know what? In the end, we're all wearing masks. We get tested every 2 days. But I do feel great putting everything like our cleaning. We've implemented much better cleaning. They spray the trailers with I think it's a kind of an ozone. I mean, we just go along because whatever they say, we have to follow. There is no. Now, some people have said we don't agree with UV boxes. There are a couple of people trying to say no. And then there's these little wands. And I bought one because a friend who I thought knew more than I did had said, yeah, you've got to buy this. And I just thought, you know what? It looks a little rinky-dink, I'm sorry to say. But we bought them. And the studio came back and said, are you happy? And I went, I think it's a little, I feel like, you know, it's not for real.
Donald, you got to, those are the things that scare me the most, because we didn't talk about the dangers of UVC.
Right.
UVC is very bad for your eyes and skin.
Right.
Do not want to do it. You do not want to be exposed to it for any length of time. If you've ever had it happen to you, and I have, it feels like somebody has rubbed your eyes with sand.
Mm-hmm. Even from the little small, I mean, they're maybe the size of your phone.
Okay, right. So here's the flip side of that. The UV can reflect off of surfaces, and if you're trying to achieve a dose, how long are you going to keep that? If you're just waving something over the top of something, that's not getting you anywhere.
Right.
You know, dose is a question of the accumulated intensity over time. And if you're just waving a wand over the surface of something, it's making you feel good, but it isn't doing anything.
My God, we needed you two on all of our protocols for motion picture, because I feel we got a little anyway. I mean, there's another one. Am I allowed to say the name of a company? But there's things like Zone Strike, where people are really saying this is what you need. And there's a lot of legit, to me, everyone is saying I'm an expert, including our COVID experts, which to me are like the school crossing guard. I will get in so much trouble for saying that, but you know, COVID officer, you know, I've taken all the courses. So if people are telling us, our problem is many of the senior people in my position who are academy members, are leaders in our industry, are finding it difficult because we feel we'll get in trouble because there's certain vested interests. If we are to say to the union, you know, we've checked around and I think some of those protocols it doesn't add up for us, and we need some help dispelling these things.
Donald, I'll give you one question that you can ask that can begin to start the conversation in a solid technical answer. Ask if they know what is the dose that they're delivering to the surface that you're trying to disinfect in something called millijoules per centimeter square.
How about I give them your number and you tell them?
I think that is the problem. Nobody's really doing their homework on what it is that they're recommending. Nobody's really looking into how effective that tool is.
The thing is, Belle, people are. This is the problem. It's like anything. Well, I don't need to. You're scientists and engineers. You don't need me to. There's always something at play that has a vested interest, and we're not sure. We're filmmakers. We just go to work, and if somebody at Warner Brothers say, you know, because that's where I've heard one. Like I worked at Netflix. They were fantastic. They look after us. A legendary, fantastic. We just did reshoots for something. And other studios where people are being, I mean, I'll give a for instance, as a layman, I'm an artist. I've been doing this 35 years. You go to the set and now you have to wear a gown like you're in a lab or a nurse. And you go, but I even know that doesn't make sense, because if you're wearing that gown to the set and you're touching up your movie star who's got their mask off, one, they're not getting COVID because you didn't have the gown on. It's all about the mask and your visor to protect us. But then you go back to the trailer and you get another actor ready and nobody's making you change your gown. So I know that much. I mean, I did 9th and 10th grade chemistry and biology and all kinds of things. You go, that's like the gloves. But we're in a kind of this quandary for us because we're having all kinds of special interests involved at the studio level. Insurance. I mean, it's like trying to get get something.
Absolutely.
And we're really like scratching our heads. And one of our governors yesterday from the academy, we had lunch saying, what are you doing on your film? Well, we're doing this. Other people are doing that. Some people were told at one studio they're not allowed to have the SterileLight box. Other people are buying 4 of them. And then there's another company shooting kind of a family movie where they have what looks like a refrigerator to me. And Belle and the ladies told me it's all mercury, which we've been told prior to that. You don't necessarily want anything. It's got kind of a blue light, and it looks like a mini bar from from a hotel. The refrigerators. And that's where they're putting their brushes. But you're working on like a $200 million movie with a mega movie star, and you're putting your stuff with everybody else's. I look at it thinking that's hardly the way I would work, protecting my movie star, putting all the stuff, because we're not allowed to put our lunch into a fridge. So why are we putting, I don't know. I mean, I don't know anything. So.
And you're saying low pressure mercury lamps are in this refrigerator?
That's what's inside this refrigerator. Yeah, it's like a refrigerator box with the mercury bulb in it.
So your concern is again, has somebody measured inside that refrigerator to make sure if you're cross-contaminating that it's truly going to disinfect all of the product before you take it out? And then when you're going to get it, are you wearing gloves? Are you then just recontaminating? So it is, I think training as well as testing can be important, at least when you install those systems.
Right. Well, it's the cost as well, because it's already putting up budgets by 20 to 25%, just testing crew, especially overseas jobs, which I've just been on. So travel, having to fly everybody first class now, that's a whole other thing, because first class looks just as likely to be contaminated as economy. It's just something's not right. But the refrigerator, I call it, it was a particular studio that insisted on it, but I thought, well, somebody's invested in this, or the transport company that provide the trailers. So we just want to know so we can revise our protocols in the coming months and years, probably, as a lot of us believe this won't change. No matter what happens, we're wearing masks forever in the film industry. I think that's pretty much.
Tom and Jill, can you give us like a brief lesson on the difference between mercury and UVC LED light? Yeah. The difference in time, how long it takes to disinfect. And
so the difference is not so much it's mercury itself. What you're confusing is that there's mercury inside a lamp. Right. That's when Jill and I refer to something called a low pressure mercury lamp. Okay. There's a very specific wavelength in the UVC that those types of lamps emit. It's actually 253.7 nanometers. Most people refer to it as 254. Mm-hmm. And that is what is creating the UVC to do the disinfection. So it's a lamp. It's not mercury itself. It's part of the construction of the lamp. And they come in a variety of sizes and powers. So, you can get a 2-watt mercury lamp, and you can get a 100-watt mercury lamp, a low pressure mercury lamp. And each one of those is putting out a different power of watts per centimeter square, which over time becomes joules, which is dose. So those are the values that you need to understand with respect to the space, the size. The good question from Donald was, okay, you're in a trailer and you've got air circulating in that trailer. Are there HEPA filters in that trailer? Are there filters that are doing something to prevent the recirculation of the virus in the air? One of the reasons planes are actually pretty safe once you're on the plane is there are good HEPA filters on the planes, and that's basically capturing a lot of the viral load that's out there. So, you've got a lot of different moving parts when you're in a space. Is it the surfaces? Is it the air? Is it the people?
Right. It's funny you say that. On some job, on the HEPA filter, on the last project I was on in Budapest, I had asked for it. They were following their own protocols. So I sent which, for me was interesting because we thought we were all following the same rules where, American, British, Canadian crews were all in agreement through our mutual unions and associations. But I get to Budapest and they're saying, well, we don't require HEPA filter. And I said, well, I need to have it. I can't not, because it's part of the protocol. So they did do it for us. But it's funny on the flight, like I've never thought I feel safer on a plane now than I did before COVID. And you really feel the difference of the way people are. And I think for us with, you know, just having things like the extra wipes, and we always had that anyway, especially the makeup department. I mean, we're touching people's faces. So there's a little bit more trust. The actors are not. There was a big fear, you know, actors, you're suddenly going to be giving, you know, telling people how to do their own makeup. That never happened. They're movie stars. They need people to make them look that way. Have you seen the news when they do their own makeup and hair? It's a disaster. But that's interesting about the HEPA, because I think we need to hear from more people who are really specialists that are neutral. Because if they have a product, it's very difficult for us to decipher. And the COVID, he or she decide what they feel is appropriate. And that's where we get stuck a little bit.
There is so much, I don't want to call it all misinformation, but conflicting information about what is working and how it should work and who should apply it. And it's so difficult. It really is. I feel bad for people. And I think Jill and I spend most of our time trying to make sure that people understand that there is a value that you need to achieve with disinfection using UVC. And if you don't achieve that value, you're kidding yourself and you're kidding your customers or your coworkers into a false sense of security, which is really the thing that scares us the most.
It's really no different than the hand sanitizer. You can go in the store and get a hand sanitizer that's 50% water, but it's not applying enough alcohol to kill germs. So if you have a UV source, you can say, well, yeah, I've got a UV source in here. But if you're not giving it enough dose, it's not actually killing the germs. It might kill 5% of them, like the watered down hand sanitizers will. But it's very important to make sure that you're not only applying UV, but applying enough UV to be effective at disinfection.
Yes, absolutely.
So is it safe to say then that as it comes up, I mean, in the next protocols, there's a big revision coming probably in the new year. Is it safe to say then that, in your expert opinion, the wands, any kind of UVC wand, no matter how they're being sold, because you've got low end that's sort of like the Walmart version to these extremely expensive things that we can, safe to say, let's stay clear from it and look to something else?
So I have two fears with that particular product. One is the danger it represents to humans, eyes and skin. Number one, because it's out in space. You don't know, somebody turns it around and shines it in your face or shines it in your eyes or leaves it on, or, you know, they're supposed to have shutoffs, but is everybody using it? But then they give you all of this information, but does anybody tell you how long you have to hold it and how close you have to be to the surface in order to achieve that level of disinfection? It's time and distance. As much as I hate to tell you, one complicated scientific fact is that as you move a source away from the surface, it reduces by the square of the distance. So it's called the inverse square law. And the intensity of the light shining on that surface decreases rapidly as you move the source away from it. And so now, okay, so you're holding the wand at 2 inches and somebody else holds it as 1.5 feet. One of them is going to be better than the other, but for how long, you still don't know.
Well, that's how I felt when I had this smaller one. It made me think of those little pointers with the red light. It just felt like it was a joke at $150. And by the time one of my assistants figured out how to turn it on, it looked like something as seen on TV that you buy at CVS, right? Except it was $137. And they wanted us to buy 20 of them, which just seemed outrageous.
It's always the question you can always ask, Donald, is what is the dose? You need to tell me the time, the dose. Dose. I need millijoules per centimeter square. And there is a number that's out there that tells you exactly how much power you need on that surface in order to kill whatever it is that you're trying to kill.
Right. It's hugely helpful. It's so helpful, right?
If they don't have that number, they don't know what they're talking about.
Right. Right.
Well, that answers it all, doesn't it? Because I think that's when people, you sort of call them on it, because I've had all kinds of people trying to get me to try something. And, you know, as I said, when I met the ladies and I tried the box, I liked it because it fit in. It was like this added thing that I was doing with the Lysol wipes. And, you know, I know a lot of it's for show. I mean, I get it. I'm in show business. I know about presentation. So we have to make it look good, and we make things look better than they really are. But it kind of had a calm about it. The wrapping the chairs in plastic didn't go down so well. But we had to do that for a while. And then people said, look, I'm not going to wet the chair. It's people were looking at, and the environmental issues have come up now. So, you know, are the Q-tips biodegradable? Well, I don't know. I mean, you know, I paint the faces. That's what we do. But now everybody's asking environmental issues, which of course is important. I get it. But and so that's really helpful for me to know that. Yeah, that's great.
Well, the great thing about our box, Donald, is it is mercury free, so it's eco-friendly.
There you go.
So
Yeah,
you got that in your pocket.
That's the big drawback for anything that's low pressure mercury or says it's a mercury lamp of any sort. There is a disposal issue, no question. And that's what's in your fluorescent tube. Every building that has a fluorescent tube has mercury in the tube. So
that's right. We're not allowed to handle them in the trailers. Those old, because we tried to get rid of them and go back to regular lighting, where the gaffer or lighting director will come in and relight our trailers with whatever we're filming. So if it's LED or, as you know, but that's really interesting that we couldn't handle, well, you never could, a fluorescent light. And yet people are buying products with it. So it's very good to know all this.
And there's also a difference, Donald, you need to understand, there's also a difference between disinfection versus sterilization. So I find a lot of people are confusing the two terminology, and we're trying to educate that there is a huge difference between sterilization and disinfecting. Tom, can you elaborate, or Jill, on the difference between disinfecting and sterilization?
Yeah, so people, you know, the term sterilization has been used incorrectly for decades. People would say, oh yeah, we're going to use UV to sterilize, and it was just the wrong word. Basically, you're trying to deactivate the pathogens, whether it's bacteria, germs, viruses. You want them not to spread. You're trying to prevent the spread of something. It could be MRSA, it could be COVID, but you want the UV to stop that biogen from reproducing and going from one brush to the next person's face. And that is called disinfection. It's not really possible to 100% sterilize the brush. It's just UV can't do it, and probably wipes can't do it. You just can't get every single cell to be killed. But what you can do is prevent passing the bacteria, germs, viruses from one person to the next by cleaning the brush with UV.
Right. Disinfect or spray your brush or your makeup with alcohol, then you put it inside the box for an added disinfecting. We're not asking the artist to use it in place of sanitizing or disinfecting their brushes or makeup.
And because the box is reflective, that light's going to reach a lot of different nooks and crannies. So the UV is going to hit the walls, and it's going to be reflected to all sides of your brushes and such at the same time. So it does add a little bit of, and it does have the ability to penetrate a little bit. As Tom said, UV tends to bounce around a lot. And in your case, having a nice chamber versus a wand where it's going to bounce around and go to areas that you don't want it to be exposed. Now the light's going to bounce around and continue to irradiate and increase the dose to the materials that you're trying to disinfect.
Right. Yeah, so it's often used with disinfecting techniques to ensure whatever pathogen hasn't been killed by one method is actually being inactivated by another. That's what the UVC LED, technology is for.
We want to do what we can to help people get safe, but also don't hurt themselves, and that's important.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.